Change the pace.
Hello, and welcome once again to the Atheist Experience.
That's right, stamping out hip-hop wherever it may be found.
Oh, there's just a little mix-up somewhere. Here we are. Welcome once again to our show. This is our second week in this time slot and on this channel. We used to air from 5 to 6 on 16, and now we're 4:30 to 6
That's right.
on 10. This show is brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm the host, Jeff Dee. Our co-host is Martin Wagner, and our guest today is Jim Kirby. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the show. We're live October 21, 2001. The Atheist Community of Austin is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings Sunday mornings at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop, 307 West 5th Street at 10:30 a.m., except for the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at 11 a.m. in the Longhorn Room of Furs Cafeteria at North Cross Mall. Our next lecture will be on November 4. David Clark will be the speaker, and his lecture is entitled Restoring the Wall, the 10 Commandments in Public Spaces. If you've been following the Statesman, there have been a series of articles about David Clark and some letters written in response to those articles. He is initiating an effort to remove the 10 Commandments monolith from the grounds of the state capitol building, and he'll be our guest next week on the show.
That's right.
ACA board meetings take place at 10, right before our regular meeting on the second Sunday of every month. This was not the second Sunday, but we had an emergency board meeting this morning. The next board meeting will be on November 11. The Godless Gamers meet every Monday night at 6 p.m. for a potluck dinner at the home of Wendy Britton. The actual game playing starts at 7 o'clock. That's a social group spin-off of the Atheist Community of Austin to get together, play board games, card games, that kind of thing. ACA Happy Hour takes place at Antonio's this coming Wednesday, which is near 183 and 35. Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. If you get there early and don't see anybody else around, hang around for a while. People trickle in as the night goes on. The audio portion of our past episodes can be heard on the internet on freethoughtradio.com every day at noon. Free Thought Radio broadcasts a wide range of atheist programs all day long. For more information, call our voicemail at 371-2911 or visit our website at www.atheist-community.org. And now it's time for news.
Okay, news time. Well,
what's new this week, Martin?
Well, what's new? It's not so much new, but there has been a trend that has been very active and has been continuing and sort of increasing in intensity ever since the September 11th attacks, and that is sort of the exploitation, as you will, of the current situation that we're in by the religious community in an attempt to sort of bring more invasive religion into the public square and getting government endorsement for it, and we're seeing quite a number of church-state violations that are just running rampant. In fact, all over the country.
Is this one top on the list?
And in fact, right here in our own home state.
That's yesterday's Statesman, right?
Yep, front page of yesterday's Statesman, talking about how Governor Perry really thinks the idea of coercive school prayer is pretty neato-keen. And here are some, I guess we're going to go ahead and take that close up.
We're going to zoom in? Perry praises school prayer.
And what it says below is, here's what gets me. It may be illegal, but it's needed, Governor says. Now, when you have it,
you know that $10,000 I stole from a bank the other day?
It may be
illegal, but I needed it.
Yeah, right.
So what's the problem?
You know all that, all that crack I smoked today? It was illegal, but I needed it. You know, this is how just ridiculous the whole thing. But this is what gets me here. This is indicative of the sort of just cluelessness that accompanies the sort of arrogance. Well, here it is. Perry has a message for Texans who might be upset by a public school prayer that caters to a majority. Be tolerant. Okay, now here's what gets me about this whole circumstance. Over in Afghanistan, we're fighting the Taliban.
Right.
Back in America, we're turning into the Taliban.
Yeah.
Seems like. Okay, and
here's what's wrong with the whole be tolerant thing, right?
Yeah.
Tolerance is when the majority stand aside and and get out of the way while some minority does a thing that they don't agree with.
Right.
That's tolerance. Tolerance is not when a minority is told to stand aside, get out of the way of the majority, and have their rights trampled all over.
No, that's called something else.
That's
called mob rule. But anyway, and here he makes another statement that I think is remarkably similar to that I've heard coming from other people. From my personal perspective, this is Rick Perry talking again, I think that a prayer life and a country that respects a higher being, our God, is a stronger country. Now,
he's free to think that.
He's free to think that.
What he's not free to do is violate the Constitution because of what he thinks.
Precisely. But anyway, now here's the distinction that people that guys like Perry aren't making. And that is, it is totally legal, 100% legal to pray in school. If you're a student and you want to pray in you want to pray in class, if you want to pray in the cafeteria before your meal, the old joke goes that as long as there are tests, there will be prayer in school. Well, that's you can do it. There is nothing that prevents a student from praying in school on their own. What is illegal is when you have a particular sectarian prayer endorsed by the school as an institution and recited over the loudspeaker where students are compelled to join along. And if they say, well, you don't have to join along, you can stay seated, what that does is it puts those students in they have this big pariah hat on their head now. Like, oh, you're the guy who stayed seated during the prayer. Mm-hmm. So you're the guy we're now going to ostracise and not include. So that's why it's not right. And but this is particularly disturbing, and I think that we need to do what we can to contact the governor's office and send letters and the complaints and things like that about this. So
we'll decide what we're going to do.
We probably we'll have to do something. But it doesn't just stop with Rick Perry. The U.S. House of Representatives on Tuesday gave its blessing to God Bless America, urging public schools to display the expression as a show of support for the nation. When it was that superstition became a prerequisite for patriotism, I missed.
Just let me cut in for just a second. If we can get a little closer on the main camera, next time we cut away, that would be good.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Because we just look so good.
Well, a little far back. Yeah. Hey, everybody way out there. We're so tiny. We're down here.
The non-binding, House resolution, it said, passed unanimously in response to several cases around the country where people have objected to displaying the words at schools, saying that religion and patriotism should not be intermixed. Uh-huh. So again, it's like anyone who dissents from the mainstream, if you have these dissenting attitudes, well, we have
to... What did the House pass a non-binding resolution about?
Urging public schools to display God Bless America. Yeah. And anyway, and here's what he says. To threaten a public school for showing the same type of patriotism that we all showed on the Capitol steps is the opposite of what this country is all about. Well, there are a lot of ways to display patriotism that don't involve,
violating the Constitution.
Yes, and, talking to invisible men. Okay, but they don't seem to be able to understand that. And, of course, the most... widely publicized dispute about this had to do with an elementary school in Rockland, California, where the ACLU kind of moved in and asked an elementary school to substitute a display of the American flag, which I think is much more patriotic, for the statement "God Bless America" on their little marquee in front of the school. I think the American flag is a much more patriotic thing to look at than some God
That's
remark.
right.
But that's, maybe, I guess I'm in the minority opinion there. Maybe.
What our government is of, by, and for the people. It's not of God, it's not by God, and it's not for God. Mm-hmm. It's completely secular.
Yeah. But anyway, the Rockland School District refused, and then there was a California Supreme Court decision that found that the phrase was, now here's the thing, a traditional patriotic phrase that did not violate constitutional separations of church and state. So essentially what they've done is they've stripped now God of all of the religious meanings that the word
the word God doesn't mean God anymore.
Yeah, so now
it's symbolic.
And now this is ironic because what's happened is in their attempts to sort of get their big religious daddy figure,
they got the government officially saying the word God doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's just a symbolism.
Yeah, so it's like in order to get, the only way apparently you can get God into the public square is if you strip the word God apparently of his religious significance, which I think kind of defeats the purpose of what the religious people want. But,
it's like Christmas is now a business holiday.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, the Senate has yet to act on the resolution, and hopefully
that's a very good point. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily mind if we changed into a culture where God was like Santa Claus, where God was just a symbolic, made-up figure that everybody knew doesn't really exist, that is, used in language,
So should we support public God Bless America signs now?
I don't know.
it's
I'm
tricky.
still not gonna.
It's a little dicey, but
I don't
you're
think
right.
we'll get to be that kind of society if we brush the meaning of the word under the carpet.
Yeah, and so then like on holidays you'll have like instead of you have old men dressed up as Santa and kids sitting on their laps asking for gifts, when we now have guys dressing up as God in shopping malls and giving presents to kids. Who knows?
Sure, why not?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway. So let's just keep going because there's more of these. Madison School Board. Now here's something similar. This is about the pledge. Now the pledge is a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
Because the pledge was before 1954. It was a perfectly secular patriotic statement, and then in 1954 it became religionized when the Christians sort of managed to exploit the current Red Scare fears of the time, and they had the phrase "under God" inserted into the text. And so the pledge, which was, previously this non-offensive, really great thing to say, has now become a subject of controversy. And in Madison, Wisconsin, the school board voted last Tuesday to permit schools to offer the Pledge of Allegiance to comply with the state law that requires a daily display of patriotism. The board voted 6-1 for the proposal after 8 hours of testimony from emotional residents about its decision last week to only allow an instrumental version of the national anthem in the Madison Metropolitan School District. Board members had decided to eliminate the pledge as an option after some parents complained about the One Nation Under God line, which didn't used to say that. It used to say One Nation Indivisible. Now it says
Go back to the original pledge.
Yeah, go back to the original pledge.
Then we'll only have to worry about, how creepy it is to have a government having all the little kiddies saying this pledge when they don't really understand, how government works at all.
Yeah.
But it'd be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, but the board, anyway, they reversed their decision Tuesday in voting in favor of schools being permitted to offer the pledge, but they said that individual students can decline to participate if they want. But still, this is a discussion we wouldn't be having.
And wear their little yellow armbands.
Right, yeah, their little symbols on their shirt. This is a discussion, again, that wouldn't be taking place if it weren't for the intrusion of religion into this, into the whole concept of what it means to be a patriot at all. Now, here's something amusing. This is showing the typical head in the sand reaction to these kinds of things. In Virginia, Sullivan County commissioners got an earful last Monday morning from an atheist. Carletta Sims, Tennessee director of American Atheists, with whom our group is not affiliated. Carletta got up and started complaining about a decision that they had to post "In God We Trust" in the county's justice centers. And she said, what exactly is your purpose in disobeying the principles of separation of church and state? She asked. The cliche that this country was founded on religious principles is an excuse for hurting others and is outdated, oppressive, regressive, and arguably wrong, according to experts on the subject. Okay, the response of the commissioners to this was to leave the room. Everybody stormed out rather than hear this, dissenting opinion. So that just kind of goes to show when you back them up against the wall, they just don't really want to, act like grown-ups, precisely. Anyway, so, Well, what else do we have in church-state news? Now, the Supreme Court, American Supreme Court, yesterday, they agreed to confront a particularly tough issue concerning separation, deciding whether a town can require permits from Jehovah's Witnesses or others who want to solicit door-to-door. Jehovah's Witnesses routinely go door-to-door to distribute literature and recruit believers, and I love it when they turn up.
I've only had one, and it was by phone.
Yeah. I've actually had a couple of Mormons, the little guys on the bikes. And
I was just surprised you didn't open up with saying knock, knock.
Oh. Should I have done? Oh, because you...
When I get the phone call from the Jehovah's Witness, right? Hello? Knock, knock. It's a joke, man.
All right. I'm sorry.
Maybe it was a bit obscure.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Anyway, okay. We're so professional on this program, folks. Anyway, Jehovah's Witnesses have sued this town, and the justices agreed yesterday to hear the appeal, the lower court's decision for the town. Village leaders said the permits are completely free. Nobody's ever been denied one. Ordinance is reasonable in, quote, weighing the First Amendment rights of canvassers against the right of homeowners to security, privacy, and peacefulness in their homes.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's, again, that balance, you have the right in your own home not to have spammers, and particularly religious spammers, just sort of, yeah. So that went on. Now, over in England, there's a weird little thing that's going on, and which is something that you wouldn't expect from England, but apparently Muslims and other minority groups in England have welcomed a new government proposal to make inciting religious hatred a crime. But others worry the effect to prevent bias attacks could stifle free expression. Civil liberties groups fear the plan to expand existing incitement to racial hatred laws. They already have, hate crimes laws over there. They want to expand those laws to include religion, but they say could dampen free speech and even shield extremists from criticism.
So you have to outlaw Christianity completely.
Well, it would seem that way.
Based as it is on the premise, and Islam along with it, based as they are on the premise that if you're not with them, then you're going to suffer an eternity of torment in hell.
Right. Well, that was one criticism that was written by someone who said that the three main monotheistic religions that we have, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have at their core this whole idea that anybody who isn't a member of this fan club,
is barely human.
That's right, and will have to suffer some sort of eternal torment and punishment.
Right.
So that's a bit of something they didn't think of, I guess. Anyway, Home Secretary David Blunkett laid out the proposal in the House of Commons on Monday as part of a package of domestic anti-terrorism measures. Blunkett told legislators that Prime Minister Tony Blair's government wanted to stop bigots from exploiting the current global crisis to stir up hatred. Yeah, you're right. And so who would be the first targets of that? Seems like Christians and Muslims. So anyway, fair comment, he says, is not at risk, only the incitement to hate. Well, who would be the judge of that? You could take the most innocuous statement in the world and interpret it as, depending on what your own mindset was telling you. But, of course, some are wary of this law because of the nature of religious belief, says Andrew Putafat, I hope I pronounced that right, Executive Director of Article 19 of Free Speech Group. It can be so intense, it's hard to imagine laws coming into existence without people seeking to use them to prohibit legitimate opinion. If there's one thing about this international conflict, he says, it's very clear to us it can only be solved by a vigorous and broad expression of views on all sides. That's one of the strengths we've got in Europe and the United States, and it's something we should hang on to. Muslims say they have suffered increased harassment and violence since the terror attacks on the United States, including a 28-year-old taxi driver from Afghanistan who was paralyzed from the neck down in one attack in West London. Ahmed Sheikh Mohammed, Vice President of the Muslim Association of Britain, said violence had escalated dramatically.
Don't their regular hate crimes laws cover that? Or did their hate crimes law exclude religious hatred?
Well, I think they just want to make sure that there's no way that the hate crime laws could be interpreted.
Well, yeah, they want to make it a law to even incite.
Or something. So there is definitely a problem. There is a hate crime problem over there, but the feeling is that this law would be too draconian in dealing with that. And comedian Rowan Atkinson,
right, Mr. Bean,
Mr. Blackadder, has a widely disseminated letter that was published in the Times, basically decrying this and saying, there's such a satire and parody, and are valuable. Yeah, we shouldn't have that. So I don't see that there's really any way in which this legislation could possibly pass over there, unless it's seriously watered down. And but anyway, but it just goes to show this really clear. So finally, in the news, last little bit, Nigerian Muslim Sharia court has sentenced a nursing mother to death by stoning after she was convicted of adultery. The court in Sokoto State in northern Nigeria convicted Safiya Hussaini for adultery and ordered she be stoned to death once she has finished weaning her baby. Well, that's nice of them. The court acquitted Yakubu Abu Kabar, whom Hussaini said had made her pregnant. She has 30 days to appeal the sentence. Do you want to take any odds on her?
I don't know.
Sokoto government officials were not immediately available to comment. Sokoto is one of more than a dozen states in predominantly Islamic northern Nigeria which have proclaimed Sharia law. Multi-ethnic Nigeria is bitterly divided over Sharia law, which was first adopted by Zamfara state in 1999. Hundreds of people were killed in 2000 in bouts of Christian-Muslim bloodletting after some northern states adopted Sharia law. Hussaini, a housewife, was not put in custody, but was told she had to present herself on the appropriate date for execution. Sure.
Oh, boy.
Well, so if she fails to do so, the police will go and fetch her, and I don't know, maybe Amnesty International will go in there and get her first.
So just another way in which
religion brings joy and happiness to everyone.
Helps everybody be crappy to each other.
That's the news.
Okay, well, that was a lot of news for this morning.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Well, I understand. So I'm gonna set aside some of my regular announcements and welcome Jim once again to the show.
Nice to be here.
Now, Jim, you're a recent new member of the Atheist Community of Austin.
That's right.
And you are involved in efforts to curtail religious abuses at Brackenridge Hospital. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
What's your background?
I've been an Austin resident for 20 or so years, on and off, and certainly a taxpayer here in Austin. And I first became aware of this issue when I talked to various friends of mine who are physicians and nurses and even patients and visitors at Brackenridge Hospital. And they mentioned to me that they were being subjected to twice daily prayers broadcast to the general public, with exception of certain units like intensive care or neonatal, where it wouldn't be appropriate. Twice daily broadcasts over the PA system of religious prayers.
Now, why is that a problem at that particular place?
Well, it's a problem because the city of Austin has a contract with Seton, which is a Catholic institution, to manage Brackenridge Hospital. And this came about because Austin lost in 1 year $40 million or something in attempting to do its indigent care, perform the indigent care through Brackenridge. The problem is that, of course, the government may not, according to the Lemon Test and Supreme Court decisions, the government may not run a religious institution, basically.
Right.
They may not offer prayers.
So it's city funds
Exactly.
that are running the hospital, and the people that are doing the work are instituting these. The organization's managing it. Excuse me. The management.
Just the management.
The management is instituting these twice daily, or did institute these twice daily with the religious.
They've been doing this for many years, and I first objected to this in 1999. And of course, the position of the church and all, even the city administrator, Betty Dunkerley, they've taken a position of obstructionist position. They refused my request. They've pulled the old Nixon trick of denying the transcripts of prayers exist. And then when I file an Open Records Act request, they come up with transcripts of the prayers.
Okay.
Fancy that.
Yeah, and now I'm trying to get a copy. They say at the last meeting that they have changed these prayers. Now they're no longer prayers. They're something more like reflections. But what they consider to be reflections,
right? Who knows what it says?
Yeah, it could be something like the Lord is my shepherd, which is not a prayer, but still is clearly an Old Testament religious reflection.
Right. Now, and what prompted them to change to these reflections? Is that in response to your complaint?
They said it was in response to my complaint. The city is maintaining, according to its contract with Brackenridge, the city has the legal obligation to provide indigent care. And this indigent care has to be non-discriminatory. In other words, indigent patients who go to Brack for care have to be given the same kind of treatment they would get, say, at St. David's or a purely public institution, HCA or whatever. And this oversight committee is supposed to assure that happens. Well, of course, in the matter of being subjected to prayers, they are not getting equal treatment. That's, of course, just one of the many issues.
Right.
And there are several others. Women, of course, are the big issue here in town. Is that it's been before the city council many times. Is that female patients are regularly denied reproductive services. It's common for women to seek sterilization after a pregnancy, full-term pregnancy, and this was done in the past at Seton Brack, by having the staff, the doctors and the nurses and the people involved, they resign from their positions at Brackenridge or Seton, work for an independent company as contractors, perform the procedure, and then resign from this and go back as regular employees of Seton. So it's a lot of charades involved with this.
Right.
The big problem is that
But then, I'm sorry, we did cover that on a previous show. As I recall, the solution that is being considered now, what happened was that the Catholic bishops came out with new rules that said we can't be having these services provided anywhere in our buildings.
That's right.
And so the plan that's being considered currently involves taking the top floor of the building.
The fifth floor.
The fifth floor. Is that not the top
floor plan? Well, I don't know. It's called the fifth floor plan.
The fifth floor. And actually making that an entire separate hospital with duplicate facilities.
Exactly. With separate entrance, separate licensing, separate elevators.
So it's technically not on their premises.
That's
right. And there's going to be a vote on that on Thursday. The 25th, is that correct?
That's right.
Right. Now we had a woman from a local organization that.
Yes, well, that's the woman's issue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have two completely different issues.
Right.
That I brought up starting in 1999. The first issue is the issue of course, subjecting everyone that goes to Brackenridge, whether visitor, patient, or physician, or nurse, or staff member, janitor, and the rest, to these twice daily religious prayers.
And they're not just religious; they're Christian prayers.
They're not only Christian; they're not only religious; they're monotheistic.
Right.
Now, the minority of the world's residents are monotheists. I mean, the Hindus aren't, the Buddhists aren't.
Right.
Of course, atheists aren't.
Right.
And so they're potentially subjecting more than half of the world's people to prayers to a monotheistic God they do not believe in. Mm-hmm. And what a more serious problem, actually, I see, is as a result of the bishop's directives, is the effective denial of counseling services to particularly indigent patients that go to Brackenridge. Now, we hear a lot of talk about informed consent. This is something that every patient is entitled to when he goes into the hospital, to make an informed consent when he submits to a medical procedure. And of course, it's many patients, they're indigent. They might be illiterate. They might not speak English. And it's very hard for them to become informed. And when they go in, they fill out an admission form, for example. It asks, what religion are you? Protestant, Catholic, or Jewish? You're not given the option to say humanist or atheist or Hindu or even Muslim, not even that. Or monotheist or not, pantheist and so on, animist or Wiccan. We had the case of the Wiccans at Fort Hood. They're given none of those chances. Now,
there's not even an other blank to fill something in.
No, there's not another. And this is the problem, because this person goes in there and effectively cannot get counseling. Now, you can't, of course, it's a violation of the rules of medical directive. When you do not resuscitate as a common medical directive, you ask that you not be resuscitated if you, say, are in a coma, terminal coma. And this is an order that you can make through a medical directive. Now, you can't have a physician or a healthcare giver, potential healthcare giver, a nurse, or anyone involved as a witness to this directive. Well, this makes sense because these people have a split loyalty.
Right.
They are not necessarily primarily interested in your welfare. They might be interested in the money they earn from the procedure. However, in the hospital, if you can't get a chaplain, well, you've got no counselor, because the only other people around you are all people in the medical profession. Now, particularly indigent people. These are people with no income, low income, no insurance, for example. Poor people, in other words. And in Austin, they're very often illiterate, don't speak English, of course. And so they're denied these rights on many levels. Now, the Catholic bishops, in their directive here, they acknowledge that every patient has a right to this type of counseling. But then they say all kinds of strange things to qualify that. I don't know if I should read some of these things. They say in all Catholic institutions, particular attention should be given to the health care needs of the poor. Right. This is a requirement of the Austin law. And it says that the common good is realized when economic, political, and social conditions ensure protection for the fundamental rights of all individuals. Well, if there's any such thing as a fundamental right in this country, it's the First Amendment, freedom of speech, religion, assembly, and so on. And these things are being regularly abused under the bishop's own plan here at Seton. They want to give particular care to people who live at the margins of our society. And they say here that they must treat its employees respectfully and justly, with equal employment opportunity for anyone qualified for the task, irrespective of a person's race, age, national origin, or disability. They don't mention religion.
I noticed that.
Yes. Or lack thereof.
Right.
Now, this, to me, to the extent that Seton Brackenridge is a government institution, this is in direct violation, of course, of Title VII, the Equal Opportunity Act. No employer can discriminate on the basis of religion in this country. The only exception being a religious institution which may seek employees of that faith. But now, of course, our public hospital serving indigent patients is not a religious institution.
Right.
Furthermore, in the city of Austin, we have codes that require of all places of public accommodation, generally hotels and restaurants, include sports clubs and hospitals, places open generally to the public in general, that they not discriminate in employment based on religion, or the whole litany of other things, and that they not discriminate in their patrons. In other words, you can't imagine Kmart having religious prayers over its loudspeaker system. This, to me, would be a violation of the Austin City Code by maintaining a religious atmosphere that is discriminating against, or hostile atmosphere, as it's called in the area of sex discrimination. This is maintaining a religiously hostile atmosphere. And Kmart doesn't do it, but Brackenridge Seton does, twice a day with their prayers.
Right. So they have, now, for counselors then, they have Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish counselors.
They're called chaplains, yes. They're called chaplains. They're all called chaplains.
And that's it.
That's right. And they maintain, we had a speaker at the last meeting of the Oversight Committee, a Representative Seton, who talked on palliative care. And they say they make every effort to find, say, a person is a Hindu, to find a counselor for that person. Mm-hmm. But of course, this is going to involve a delay. It's going to involve their asking the question, the person offering this, maybe in a foreign language. And so there still is this intake form, this admission form, which is taken by computer by a nurse when you go in there, that does not allow people that are not Protestant, Catholic, or Jewish to have any kind of counseling whatsoever. Right. Unless they, of course, these indigent non-speakers of English, you might imagine, specifically ask for that kind of care. And this is putting too heavy a burden on these people. And I say it's in violation of their rights.
They'd have to find somebody and tell them, I'm Muslim. They wouldn't let me put it on the form, but I'm Muslim. Give me a Muslim guy.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And there's several other problems. I mean, why would a person want counseling? These are the questions you want to ask. Now, this is part of palliative care. Palliative care partly refers to some kind of spiritual counseling, but also refers to things like drugs for, say, morphine and terminal illness. When you're in pain from cancer, for example, a person has the right to that. And doctors notoriously have underprescribed this over the years. A woman goes in, for example, she wants counseling as to whether or not to have the baby, or whether she has sterilization afterwards. These are legitimate concerns of most women. And she won't get counseling from a neutral source. And some matters as simple as circumcision. Now, circumcision, except for Jews and Muslims, is not a religious rite, although the majority of Americans do submit to this. Of the boys, it's now made illegal to mutilate a woman's sex organs, but it's still legal to mutilate a little boy's sex organs. And so the woman going in there, being unsure, not knowing of the controversy, would not have any counseling. And of course, the order of do not resuscitate is involved, and just concerns, for example, like organ donation. This is something you might want to counsel. Right. You're dying, or a motorcycle accident or whatever. Motorcycle riders are organ donors, of course, known as organ donors because of the head injuries they suffer. But these people and their families are entitled to neutral counseling when it comes to something like organ donation. So there's a whole range of things that general patients, and especially indigent patients, are deprived of when they're counseling.
So what's to be done about this, then?
Well, I myself have studied hospital chaplaincy. I performed as a hospital chaplain when I was in seminary at the Hartford Hospital, a 1,100-bed hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. And I went through the entire program there and, in fact, served as a chaplain of the Unitarian Church. And I proposed that what should be done here at Brackenridge is that the intake form, the admission form, ask a person, first of all, do you have a religion or not? First of all, do you want counseling or not? And if you want counseling, it should be religious or secular. And you could break that down. If religious, then it should be Protestant, Catholic, let's say. And if secular, should it be humanist, atheist, or just secular of some kind? Now, I would propose that I apply, let's say, to be a chaplain or a counselor in this case at Brackenridge and be considered for this position to counsel all patients who either indicate humanist, atheist, or secular, let's say, or rationalist. There could be a whole list of patients, even Roman Catholics, of course. Roman Catholics are known to baptize the infants, and then there are many Roman Catholics who don't want to wake up from a coma and see a priest. Most of my friends are that way. And even Roman Catholics, of course, would specify secular counseling, if given the opportunity, which they are now denied.
So that you intend to follow through on this plan, then?
Yes, I'm trying to follow through on that. Of course, I'll probably have to file open records request and maybe seek legal action just to get the paperwork from them. I've asked them for There are new prayers, there are new transcripts of prayers, and they're always busy. No one's there to respond. I've asked them for just the printout. It's a 12-page printout of the admission form. And they've dilly-dallied about sending me that. I still don't have that. Mm-hmm. So I imagine, the problem we have in Austin, especially at Brackenridge, is that women, being a majority, really don't have the same problem that others have in their issue of reproductive care. Women are majority in this country. And by simple majority vote, they could overturn Brack's practices. Now, Governor Perry and the Austin City Council realize that their constituency is the majority. They really don't care at all about a minority. And the only way to get action from them, if you're a minority, whether you're gay or atheist or one of black or Hispanic, ultimately you probably have to threaten them with a lawsuit. And that's why we're a litigious society. In Italy and in Germany, for example, minorities like the Greens have representation in the parliament, and you can go to your representative. This country, we don't have that possibility. So lawsuits are always often the only threat you have. So the politicians I know around here are determined to ignore all minorities, because after all, the minorities didn't elect them.
Right. All right. Well, that's. I think we're ready to take calls now.
Yeah,
that's absolutely fascinating, and there's probably a lot of comments out there. If we can have
live
a phone
call-in
number.
show.
This is a live call-in show. There's the number on your screen, 477-2288. While we're waiting for the calls to come in, why don't I go back to the?
I was just going to ask you, Jim. Do you have an attorney working with you to get all this squared away? And
well, I am an attorney. I have a law degree from UT, and I don't. I'm not a lawyer. I do not represent other people, but I have studied civil rights law in particular at UT, and am prepared to pursue this myself, and of course seek aid. But I realize that the Texas ACO, for example, is always overburdened because every time you get a court decision against the Baptists or the Catholics that are out there, the next time infringing your rights, putting up another granite monument, or praying at some school football game. So it's a continuing battle.
Right.
And I would be happy to offload the ACLU.
Break. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's do just the regular announcements here quick. We don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. Buttons. That's the buttons Martin and I are wearing here. This is the catchphrase of our show because Christians are always asking us why we hate them so. We don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. And if you see me or Martin on the street and stop and tell us that you watched the show, we will offer you a button. National Atheist Ombuds. Any instances of slurs, defamation, or discrimination against atheists or other non-believers in the U.S. media can now be reported to the National Atheist Ombuds by emailing ombuds@atheism.org. Please remember to include as many details as possible and a news source where applicable. Incidents will be reported to participating national and local and non-theist organizations who have agreed to distribute press releases regarding the reported subject matter. The Third International Rationalist Conference will be in New Delhi, India on February 8 to 12, 2002. All correspondence to the Third International Rationalist Conference should be addressed to conference@rationalistinternational.net. For more information, visit www.rationalistinternational.net. There's a petition denouncing Jerry Falwell. I probably won't mention this again.
I think it's pretty much dealt with.
It's dying down, but just for fun, one more time, www.petitiononline.com/Falwell.
32,000-something signatures. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mentioned Free Thought Radio during the opening comments, and I want to also mention the Atheist Network. It's another atheist audio station on the internet, also showing airing a number of different atheist and secular free thought skeptical programs. Their web address is atheistnetwork.com. Kathleen Parker, we've been talking about her for a while. And speaking of the Atheist Ombuds, this is how a lot of people found out about her, is via the Ombuds. Kathleen Parker closed her chat room, claiming it was because of profanity. This is the columnist who claimed that atheists had been silenced by the September 11 terrorist attacks and repeated the lie that there are no atheists in foxholes, praising our nation's return to the theistic roots of her parents while conveniently forgetting that those roots only go back as far as the 1950s. The message board on our website became a major new discussion forum for atheists who who descended on it in droves to let her know that we were not silenced in the least. And I posted a few things there myself.
Me too.
She never responded to our criticisms except to say that she was too busy, which she said once to one random atheist, with instructions for that atheist to tell all the rest of us, as if we were all one big club. The claim that she shut her chat room down because of profanity is ridiculous.
Yeah, I didn't see very many.
There were some, but I've been to many chat boards.
Oh yeah, a lot worse.
And while certainly rife with sarcasm directed at her, it carried far few naughty words than most. While her chat board is no longer accepting new posts, you can still read the ones that are already there at www.kparker.com/wwwboard/wwwboard.html.
I mean, it's very clear that she just didn't like the fact that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of atheists were descending on her site and stripping away all of her precious little prejudices.
Yeah.
It was much more important for her to hang on to her prejudices than to be disabused of them.
That address, once again, for Kathleen Parker's now inactive but still readable message board is www.kparker.com/wwwboard/wwwboard.html.
Anyway.
Last week, we got a complaint from a caller who was left hanging on the line when we ran out of time, and he accused Russell, our producer, who was playing call screener that time, that we were afraid of taking the hard questions.
Oh.
And after the show, Russell remembered what the hard question was. He said,
what was this hard question?
The question was, what do atheists base their morals on?
Oh, that's a toughie.
And he apparently thought we were deliberately blowing him off because we didn't get to him before the end of the show. Would you like to comment on this? How do you decide what's the right way to behave toward your fellow human beings if you don't believe that there is some big guy in the sky looking down, deciding whether to fry you forever or not?
Well, this is a serious question, yes.
Yes, it is.
It takes a lifetime of thought to come to the conclusion of this, I think. And I've been to seminary, and I've studied this formally, of course, in philosophy and theology, in addition, of course, to biblical studies. And there are great atheists who've written about this. Bertrand Russell comes to mind. And of course, our own Dr. O'Hare had a system of morals. And I had her lecture at UT Law School, I remember. And she explained then the atheist morals. Of course, I can't speak for all atheists.
Sure. Yeah, I don't expect you to go into any great detail, but in general.
There are humanists and scientists. I'm a scientist. I'm a physicist. So basically, I don't call it morals. I call it ethics. And this is, of course, one of the branches of philosophy that you study. What is right and what's wrong. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the one basic principle, which is also biblical and in the Quran, is treat everyone as you would like to be treated yourself. The so-called golden rule.
Yeah, Confucius came up with that 500 years before
exactly.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say it's a fundamental human paradigm, almost. I mean, in terms of like how you behave, just good behavior, generally. Behavior.
I myself studied situation ethics when I was in seminary, and the principle there was of Joseph Fletcher's was to maximize love, and that was his guiding ethical principle. And he said, in maximizing love, the end always justifies the means. And this is something surprising, and when you read Joseph Fletcher, you'll end up agreeing with him, that the end always justifies the means. If the end doesn't, if your end does not justify the means can't be justified.
I see.
If your end is maximizing love, for example,
right.
that justifies
the
all means.
justification, whether it justifies the means, is used as a yardstick by which to evaluate the behavior, rather than...
So the end, if anything justifies the means, it's always the end.
Mm-hmm. Martin?
Well, I always say that I think that the most practical way to base your behavior, what you might call morals or ethics, regardless, is the simple fact, which is observable in our day-to-day lives, that actions have consequences. You can see the results of an action, and if the results of an action are beneficial to one and all, well, then that can be considered something that's a good thing to do. If, on the other hand, the results of an action are destructive or harmful, then I think just practically you can look at that and say that's not a good thing. We shouldn't do those. I shouldn't do those things. People in general shouldn't do those things. So it's very, very simple. Look at the world around you. It's not rocket science. It doesn't take a whole lot of deep philosophical thought to be able to judge what are good activities and what are bad activities, what are good or bad behaviors, and act accordingly. It really isn't that hard. The whole idea, though, that what doesn't make sense about the idea that morals, and I know callers, you've got a couple callers hanging on, we'll get to you in just a second, but the whole idea that morals are just a list of rules handed down to you from this all-knowing divine being, well, there's a couple problems with that. And the first of which is, where is the frame of reference here? I mean, it seems to me that in order to be able to say, do this because it's a good thing to do, how do you know it's a good thing to do? Well, you have to know what bad things are and what bad things are to do. And just like walking into a room, if you walk into a room and you say, boy, it's cold in here. Well, how do you know it's cold? Well, you have a frame
compared to what?
Yeah, right. So if you have a God who's just sort of coming up with these concepts, apparently for the very first time in existence ever, what's his frame of reference? He has none. He's just sort of making it up as he goes. In which case, it's just as arbitrary as it would be as the Christians claim humanist ethics is.
Right.
It's just purely arbitrary. God is saying, oh, well, don't kill, where he could just have easily have said,
yeah, go ahead and kill.
And that would have been a morally sound precept. So,
Right. If right and wrong is just whatever some God tells us.
Or, on the other hand, if he did have a frame of reference that he used to determine his morals,
then it's the frame of reference and not the God that determines.
It implies a higher moral authority than God, which I don't think is a place most Christians want to go.
Yeah.
Anyway,
let's go to calls. We have Nancy on line 1. Nancy, you there? Nancy? Nancy?
Hello.
Hi. Sorry about that. Welcome to the show. What can we do for you?
Thank you. I just have a question for you. Well, actually a comment to the last question.
All right.
Personally, I was raised Catholic, but I would think that you all would just have respect for life.
Yeah, that's high on my list of priorities.
As far as where do you get your morals from, that would be an inborn respect for life.
I wouldn't want to leave it at just inborn, because as I understand it, what we have born into us is the result of instincts passed down through generations of ancestors going back to, pre-hominid tribal animals. And we don't live in the same kind of situations that they lived in back there, and that's why sometimes our instincts get us into trouble. We can't just go by what our instincts tell us, because the situation for which those instincts evolved is different.
Why would we have people that murder and maim and rape? And I'm sorry, you did make a good point.
Yeah.
That can't be inborn, because we wouldn't have all these way out people.
And most of those crimes that you mentioned are usually end up being what are called crimes of passion. Somebody just snaps. And
I'm not even talking about really way out people. I mean, like, you're standing in a supermarket and everybody turns away for a second and there's a $20 bill sitting there, right? I mean, if we're just unthinking animals just wanting to gather our nuts and hide them away for the winter, then you reach out and grab that $20 bill and stuff it in your pocket, right? That instinct, the desire to go ahead and take the stuff you think you can get away with, is exactly the kind of instinct that we've been handed down that doesn't work now because we don't live in that kind of situation anymore.
Okay, and quick question, how do you feel about religious fanaticism fueling all these wars? I mean, past, obviously present, and could be future, and I'll let you go and answer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I'm against it. Jim?
I'd like to point out, partly in answer to her last question, that our founding fathers, for example, thought there were some things more important than life. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, and most of them lost one or more of those in order to maintain liberty. And at the same time, these are our great patriots in this country. And the first terrorist act in this country was the Boston Tea Party, performed by these very patriots who valued liberty more than life itself.
Interesting. Martin? Comments? Shall we move on?
Religious fanaticism, bad.
Okay. How about Chris? Chris, you there?
Hi,
Chris.
Quick question for you guys.
Yeah.
Do you think that the world would be a better place, or if there was no Bible or no religion at all? I mean, as atheists, that's got to be the way you look at it, right? If there's nothing to believe in, you think the world would be better off if there was no religion at all or no Bible. And
it's a little more complicated than that, right? A lot of people are relying on these supernatural beliefs to help, keep their lives together. They lean on them as emotional crutches, and they make a lot of their decisions based on those beliefs, and a lot of their support structure, friends and relatives and things are hanging together on the basis of these shared beliefs. So if it just disappeared overnight, of course, there'd be a lot of problems. On the other hand, if we replace those things that are good from religion, like support structures and sources of comfort and so on, replace those with real things rather than myths, then I think that would be better.
What do you mean by real things?
Well, as opposed to gods that aren't real.
No.
Okay, but you're admitting that people are benefiting by religion just by your previous statement, correct? You're saying the support it gives people who need it.
Yeah, but people, a person benefits from a crutch, but of course it's better not to have the crutch. It's better to have the leg fixed, really fixed, and then get rid of the crutch, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if somebody breaks their leg and they don't mean to break their leg and the crutch helps them,
yeah.
whose fault is that?
There's a limit to this analogy.
You make the analogy yourself. You just brought up the crutch. So I'm saying if somebody breaks their leg and they need the crutch to get around and it helps them, is that a bad thing?
Of course. Let me answer that. We atheists happen to know you don't have to believe in God to be happy. You don't have to believe in God to have friends. You don't have to believe in God to live a good life. All of that is actually false.
But you can believe in God and have a good life. Right?
Yeah, but so the issue is, what other baggage does religion bring along that makes it a bad trade-off? Okay, and that's stuff like, believing that everybody on the planet is destined to spend an eternity in hell unless they join that club.
Well, I'm a Christian. Kind of I'm a Christian, but I don't believe that. I mean,
well, all right.
I mean, many Christians
it doesn't bring me any baggage, so maybe it brings you baggage.
It probably does, but I'm not really interested in questioning it until we find out what it is.
Yeah, but the fact is, many Christians do believe that, and that's very actively preached by many Christian ministers. I mean, you may not believe in the existence of a hell where non-believers are punished forever. That's fine, but but that is preached. I mean, from church pulpits, and I think that does sink in with many other believers other than yourself, and so I think that would be one harmful element of the belief system.
Well, I just think that in the trade-off of it, just in a scale of things, if there's no religion, and like you just said before, it helps a lot of people who might need it.
Yeah.
If it wasn't there,
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay. Given a choice between a belief that is true and a belief that is not true, all other things being equal, what's the better thing to believe?
A belief that is true and a belief that is not true?
Yeah. Given a choice between those two, all other things being equal, what's better?
Belief.
Is it better to believe things that are true, or is it better to believe things that aren't true?
The true one.
The true one. We agree. Okay. And so all we're saying is there are accurate beliefs that you can rely on to live a happy life, and then there are inaccurate beliefs, right? Beliefs that are true and beliefs that are false. Both, you can rely on either one to help you get through life. All we're saying is it's better to rely on the ones that are actually true than to rely on the ones that are false, and we'd put religion over here. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but I mean, what's true to me might not be true to you, so it's...
No. Yeah, people are...
I don't think there's such thing as a universal truth.
No.
Nothing is universally true.
God, I think you would agree, there is either a God or there isn't, right?
Oh, yeah, there's a God. There's no question in my mind there's a God. There's no question.
That's not that's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
On the question of gods, right? A God either exists or he doesn't.
Okay.
Right? It's not God exists for you but doesn't exist for me.
Well,
there either is a God all the time or there isn't a God all the time.
Yeah, we're talking about questions of fact now as opposed
well, no, you're trying to say... You're basing your things on...
That's not the issue.
Yeah, but how could you say there's no God just because you haven't seen him? Right? You needed to see him. That's basically what it comes out to. You need to see him to believe him. So I'm not going to go...
Jim's got a comment here. Go ahead.
Well, I approach this whole question from the point of view of a scientist. And scientists basically are non-believers. Not just because they believe, say, in science or believe in an alternative theory, of the origin of the universe. Scientists don't believe in believing at all. I think there are two kinds of people in the world. Believers, some people who lose their first belief, spend their lives looking for another belief. Others who are non-believers, and I put myself and I think most scientists in this camp. We do not believe in believing. What characterizes believers of any persuasion is that they assert most strongly those things for which they have the least evidence, things like the Assumption of Mary, the virgin birth, the Immaculate Conception, divinity of Christ. All of these things are great doctrines for which there is no evidence. Now, scientists don't say things like, for example, I believe in the Big Bang Theory or whatever. They will say there's evidence for this and there's contrary evidence and we need more evidence. They don't go around talking about what they believe in. There's a different kind of mentality here. When you study science, science is not a collection of facts about the universe. Science is a way of thinking.
Okay, but I'm not a scientist, so to me, most people aren't scientists. So you're saying that unless you're a scientist, it's wrong. You have to be a scientist in order not to believe. You're trying to base it on science, and then
take it from here. Right. Yeah, I know. I used the belief word myself a second ago, and though I basically agree with him, to me it comes down not to a question of absolutely knowing for sure, or claiming to know absolutely for sure if something is true or false. What matters is where's the weight of evidence. Right? If you're going to go on some assumption, you go on assumptions that have the weight of evidence in their favor, right? The weight of evidence is against the existence of a God.
Yeah, but how old is the Bible? How many people read it, and it seems
that's
like
immaterial. That's completely immaterial.
A lot of people obviously get. This Bible. My whole question was just if the world would be a better place without the Bible. You said that a lot of people use it as a crutch, possibly.
And my answer is yes, it would, given that the functions of serving in our society get taken up by something else.
But what would that something else be?
Well, because
any sort of practical system of ethics that you can apply to day-to-day life and use your observations of.
Don't you think that it's there for a reason? Don't you think, long before you were born, it was there.
This is going to be your last caller. This is going to have to be your last question because we'll have to move on.
Okay,
we'll answer you.
Go ahead. Finish your question.
I said, don't you think that the Bible is there and religion is there for a reason?
Yeah, exactly the same kind of reasons why the Egyptian Book of the Dead is there, the Odyssey is there, the Quran is there, the Talmud is there. Human beings get ideas into their heads, they elaborate them into these huge, complex belief systems, and they write them down. And then they go around trying to convince other people to believe the same thing. That's the reason. It's not because they're actually true. If that was the reason, then the Odyssey would have to be true. It's there too.
Yeah, or the Egyptian, gods would have to be true. You're just claiming that just because a belief system is old, it must be true. That's
well, I'm saying but how it benefits people as well. That was my point.
Well, all right. Well, we're going to move on. Thanks very much for your call. We're here every week, and you're welcome to call back. Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to dodge the question of what else in place of religion. It's just that it's complicated, right? I wouldn't necessarily want to, say, take out a church and replace it with a building that sits in the same place and is sold to the same people, but just happens to have a preacher at the front telling everybody, not to believe. Right? It's more complicated than that.
That doesn't solve really anything.
If you're worried about things in your life, right? You're worried about, will I get the job that I'm hoping to get, right? And you have these anxieties. There are other places you can turn than an ancient holy book to find comfort, right? You can turn to real people. You can turn to real friends, real loved ones, and find your way through like that. It doesn't take belief in a God who can snap his fingers and make it true, especially since, as often as not, it doesn't come true, right? Yeah. I mean, then that leads to all complex beliefs about, God's got a mysterious plan, and that's why, even though I'm relying on him to get my job for me, I didn't get it this time.
Yeah.
It's all a bunch of unnecessary, complex, mumbo jumbo.
But
Find your comfort in real things.
What I wanted to enhance what you just mentioned really quickly, I want to ask, I think this ties into what we're talking about with Jim today, which is not just the question of, well, will I get a job or other sort of earthly questions, but, but our caller was talking about bigger questions. I'm sure that what our last caller wanted to know was, when people using religion as a thing to deal with even bigger questions like sickness, death, that sort of thing.
Circumcision,
whatever. And I think that you're probably in a really good position right now to address that, because because you want to go in and be a secular counselor, a grief counselor, as it were, at Brackenridge.
Well, there's more than grief involved.
Yeah,
right.
But that's part of it, yes.
Yeah, and so it seems that, and so I was just curious if you had some sort of, answer to our last caller as to, well, without religion, what would people use to deal with?
Well, I'd like
these
to ask you: do you believe in atheism? Is this? I mean, you say I believe in atheism.
No, atheism is just the lack of belief in God.
So it's a different thing when religious people or superstitious people talk to you. Superstitious people share with religious people the preference for seeking extra-rational solutions or answers to life's problems. Whereas I think atheists and rationalists and scientists do not. And so you can't quite equate like science with belief or atheism with a religion.
The processes
are different. It's kind of a meta question in philosophy. First of all, is it a belief? And then if it's a belief, what kind? And we have all these superstitions and religions that are. But then atheism isn't really a belief.
Right.
It's something different.
Disbelief.
Yeah. And in fact, this brings up an issue. I have a friend who has a ongoing medical condition that he just found out about recently. And when he told me about this on the phone and I was talking with him, my first response was not, well, get on your knees, brother, and pray to God to make sure everything that comes out okay. My response was, well, have you got multiple opinions on this? What are they telling you? What is the latest research in the area that concerns you?
Exactly.
And we talked through it, and found the comfort in knowing what the facts were, and understanding of what can be done has been done, and that the odds are looking pretty good, right? I mean, that's really all it takes. It does not take embracing some outside supernatural.
And this is what is missing at Brackenridge.
Right. So then our Christian caller asks you, well, what if your friend called you up and said said it's absolutely terminal, I'm going to be dead in 24 hours? Then what do you say to him?
Then I would go to that friend and I would spend that time with him and make him as comfortable as possible.
Right. Okay. That's how it works.
All right. Let's go to Jeremy. Jeremy, there?
Yeah. Hey, guys. What's going on?
Sorry to keep you waiting.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for waiting.
Problem.
What can we do for you?
I didn't catch the very beginning of the show, nor was I at a coffee shop today. Were there lots of talk of, Rick Perry trying to reinstitute school prayer?
There was some discussion of that, yeah.
Yeah.
We covered it in our news segment at the start of the show, too.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh, it's horrible. It's ridiculous. And, I mean, what I got out of the paper was that, not only, is he, trying to do it, but, coming up in the next election, Tony Sanchez, the likely Democrat.
Yeah, but did you read what Sanchez had to say?
Well,
right. I mean, Sanchez, in his actual words about prayer in school, all he was arguing for is what's already legal, right? Freedom of kids to pray on their own time. So it's kind of a different thing, But of course, he's going to spin that as a pro-prayer in school position because that's the way you get votes these days.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of pandering going on. I've characterized this sort of increase in religiosity sort of post-September 11th it strikes me as being very highly exploitive in nature.
Yeah.
We saw this to a much smaller degree when we've had smaller tragedies in this country, comparatively. No tragedy is small, but when, we had something like the Columbine shooting or the Oklahoma City bombing, and immediately what you find is, on the one hand, you do get, people who are religious who will seek their comfort in their times of, confusion as a result of these things.
Right.
And I can certainly understand how a religious person would have a great deal of confusion, witnessing tragedy while attempting to believe in an all-loving God. But in addition to that, what you have had have been religious organizations and very big public religious figures very clearly exploiting these tragedies for their own gain. Either their own prominence in the field of Christianity, or for the gain of the church. It's just all about scare people, get new members. I read a news article. I didn't bring it in, because I have to edit my news. But apparently there's this Halloween thing going on in the suburb of Atlanta that's being put together by these Christians.
Oh, right.
Yeah, where it is clearly. It's all sorts of hate and fear-mongering and bigotry and of the worst stripe. And as this Halloween display, showing people who don't favor prayer in school going around shooting people who do and things like that. This is what this little Halloween display is. And it's being put on by this church, and clearly the purpose is to exploit the current situation of fear that we're in our country, following the terrorist attacks, to get people, well, we're the answer. Come join our little group, and then everything will be okay with you, presumably. That's what it is. So to me, it's clearly exploitational.
Anything else, Jeremy?
Just had a question about whether the ACA, at any time specifically, endorses a candidate and what kind of considerations.
We can't do that. We're a nonprofit organization.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. Okay. Well, yeah.
All right. Thanks for your call. Bye-bye. And Joe.
Yeah, I have two comments I'd like to make, and if those comments seem to make atheist way of thinking sound ridiculous, I'd appreciate you not hanging up on me.
We don't do that.
Okay.
We only hang up if calls go on way too long and the person on the other end won't interact with us.
Okay. Well, the first comment I'd like to make is that it sounds ridiculous to me that you base your morals on how you would expect to be treated by others. I think it goes a lot further than that, because if I feel that if I do something wrong, that somebody should slap me, that doesn't mean that we should go around slapping people when they do something wrong because I feel that's how I should be treated.
Okay, what's your comment?
Or if I have not meaningless sex with other people is a good thing to do, then I don't think that our morals should be based on what I feel, is the way I would like to be treated, having meaningless sex with a bunch of people. To me, that's a pretty ridiculous way to base your morals on how you would like other people to treat you. It goes a lot further than that.
All right. What else?
And the other comment is that the creation of everything seems to be pretty obvious, that the stars, what's beyond the stars, everything came from something and not just an accidental explosion, or everything being created, everything being in existence from nothing. That seems to be pretty impossible. So the logical thinking that everything is in existence from a creator, whatever you want to consider that creator being, that seems to be a more logical, scientific way of looking at things. And I called in one time. One last thing to say is I called in and I pointed out that science seems to had in the past failed its community by
you're that guy.
Yeah, by let me end
You're
this.
an idiot.
let me end this. Don't hang up on me.
Finish your comment.
Basically, what I said was that science failed us by saying that the world was flat, and you said that Christian people said that. So my response to that is, did Christian people draw up those maps of the world 500, 600, 700 years ago, or were those science and people who studied maps and did, the maps that we find are 1,000 years old, say that the world's flat. So that was not Christian people who made those maps up. Those were actual science saying, hey, this is the facts. The world is flat. We don't know what's beyond it.
Are you done?
Obviously.
Yeah. Finish up there. This is, Joe?
Yeah.
Do you want to actually trade comments back and forth here, or do you want to hang up and listen?
No. I'd like to, comments back and forth. Yeah.
You would. All right. Where should we go? Start? Okay. First of all, saying that it's silly to live by how we'd expect to be treated by others, right?
Right.
That's the golden rule. It's in the Bible. We didn't make that up. It also happens to have been talked about 500 years earlier than the Bible by Confucius.
Confucius, yeah.
So. I'm not quite sure what your point there is. If you're attacking the Golden Rule, you're attacking Christianity as well. Then to say that the creation is obvious, and you said in defense of the statement that creation is obvious, is that you can't imagine that it wasn't created. Well, that's a logical fallacy you're committing. It's called an argument from incredulity. You can't defend your argument by saying, well, I just can't believe that I'm wrong. Okay, that doesn't prove a thing. In science, okay, the way science works is scientists do not make up answers. If in fact we don't have evidence that shows where the universe came from, and I'm not making any statements about what we do or don't know, but if the situation is that we don't know, then the scientific thing to say is we don't know. The scientific thing to do is never, okay, it's never the scientific thing to do to make up a God and say, because we don't know where the universe came from, we're going to say God did it. That is never scientific. Well, finally, can I ask how old you are?
Oh, how old?
Yeah, how old are you?
About 35.
35, okay. Had you been born before science became a driving force in our civilization, you'd have been dead 10 years already.
I'll agree with you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this whole science keeps failing us thing is just ridiculous.
Well, wait
a minute.
Okay, go ahead.
When science started out, science was around for a long time before the progress of science started noticing, hey, a lot of these religious claims that we're all supposed to believe are not supported by the evidence. Science was around for a long time. Many of the earliest scientists were also Christians. So in answer to your question about maps, the answer is both. They were both Christians and, researchers. I'm not quite sure map making counts as a science, but they were certainly, on the one hand, believing the supernatural claims of religion, and on the other hand, gathering information and putting their maps together.
Because they lived at the time.
But the Bible specifically talks about the four corners of the earth. So the only kind of shape that has exactly four corners is either a flat, square, or rectangular plane, or a thing with four triangular sides.
Tetrahedron.
Right. So basically, we don't understand what the four corners of the earth is referencing to when we consider that.
I'll tell you, there just aren't any corners on a sphere, dude.
But if we look into that deeper, we could find out what the meaning, what that statement was.
But now you're talking about symbolic interpretation of Scripture.
What you're doing there, when you say if we look deeper, what you're doing is you're trying to find excuses to go on believing that they were right all along. The fact is, they weren't right all along. They believed something that wasn't true. And the Bible's full of stuff.
Okay, but let me back up.
It's not to be true.
All right, let me back up and say that scientifically,
this is going to be your last comment. Then we're going to move on. Okay,
one last thing. Scientifically, creation makes sense because what we see in the creation of everything that we know of, plants, life, animals, the stars, there's order and design in that. It's not just some chaotic thing. That when we look at a tree or we look at a human or we look at an animal, there's order and design in everything we look at. So there is pretty much evidence saying that the order and design of everything that is in existence, it makes sense to say that some creator created that, because scientifically we don't have anything that has no order and design.
Okay, Joe, thanks for your call.
Okay,
I'm gonna let you go now, and Martin is gonna respond.
Well, first off, Joe, how do you know there's order and design? I mean, once again, what's your frame of reference? Give me an example. Well, you can't now because you're not. But I'd like you to call back on the show and give me an example of what the universe would look like had it not been designed by a god.
Yeah, can I make a comment right there? One of the most famous creationist arguments is the watchmaker
argument, right?
Which basically says, well, if you're walking down a beach and you find a watch on the beach and you pick it up and you look at how elaborate its mechanism is and all that, how crafted it appears to be, you would be able to tell by looking at its complexity that it was designed, right? The proper response to that argument is compared to what? And in the case of the watchmaker argument, it's compared to the beach. Mm-hmm. So watches, in fact, prove that beaches were not designed. Because by comparison, you can look at a watch and say, well, that's, clearly I can see places where the file has been used to file down these points and make everything work together. I can find fingerprints on it. I can it's signed on the back with the name of the watchmaker. If the kind of design inherent in a watch compared to the kind of design that's inherent in a beach is proof that the watch is designed, it's also proof the beach wasn't.
Yeah.
And that just blows the entire argument. It's ridiculous.
But of course, the final criticism is, well, if God designed the universe and everything in it, who designed him? I mean,
there's another good point.
You have to consider the fact that if complexity is the argument, is the rationale behind believing that the universe was designed, complex things can't have just come together by the random chance. They have to have been designed. Well, then it's simply, I think it's once again talking about logic and rationalism and all that. Any God capable of designing this sort of universe would have to be a pretty complex entity itself. So if complexity requires a design, then God requires design. Okay, so there's
infinite regress.
So there's a super God having to design God, and then super God having to have been more complex than the God who designed the complex universe. You've got super to God.
You have one God,
and then we go on with gods back forever and ever and ever until we just have billions and billions of gods and never stop. So
there's another thing you said on an earlier show that I thought was very very insightful, which is that order is what we call stuff that hasn't fallen apart. If we have a universe full of chaos and there are bits of it that hold together, well, those are the ordered bits. That's what order is.
Yeah.
Order is when you're not fallen to pieces. So to say that the mere existence of order is proof that there was design is also ridiculous, because you have to have order to have anything, right? And order does come about naturally. It's just
we see evidence of it all the time.
As random things are happening, sometimes it doesn't fall apart. Sometimes it sticks together. And the stuff that sticks together, some of that stuff acts on the things around it to get it to stick together. Okay, there's like there are chemical catalysts, for example, that do exactly this. If you ever worked with two-part epoxy, you mix the two things together. Instead of getting two globs of gloop, you got a nice solid puddle. It solidifies.
But the chemical compound is even stronger now.
That's right. That's right. The mixture, the interaction, the natural interaction of the two bits of the epoxy result in a solid, more ordered structure.
So to claim that the universe...
Nice try there, Joe.
Yeah, to use the term, better luck making us sound ridiculous next time. But the whole idea that, to claim that a God created a universe is simply, you're answering a mystery with a mystery. You're not really answering the question. You're just introducing a mystery to explain the mystery.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, one thing I'd like to add is that one proof of intelligent design might be look for a certain sequence of numbers. Well, say 1 million digits long, say in pi. If that's there, that shows some kind of design. Like 1 million ones in a row or something like that. Well, it's been shown, just number theory, that any arbitrary sequence of arbitrary length will be found in pi. What is that proof of? To me, every universe can be explained, every possible universe, including this one, can be explained purely by chance.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next call. It's Andrew, excuse me. Andrew?
Yes.
You there? Hi. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. I heard something you said. I don't want to misquote you. Maybe you want to repeat it before I say what I wanted to say.
Okay.
You made a comment about people that follow the supernatural crutches that could be replaced by practical, real crutches. And then I think the fellow on your right, or on your left, my right, you made a comparison about how he could implement that in his work, correct? Can you repeat?
Yeah, he has
Can you repeat your philosophy about that?
Jim is a guest on our show. He is planning on presenting himself to Brackenridge Hospital as a secular counselor. They call it a chaplain. A secular chaplain, because they don't have such things to give guidance and counseling to people who do not happen to be Jewish, Protestant, or Catholic. Okay. And all we were talking about, as far as Jim is concerned,
can you quote what you
is that
you had a pretty solid philosophy about it.
Sorry?
We can't hear you very well.
Could you repeat what you said about that? You had a pretty solid philosophy and some real differences about people that follow supernatural
we said a lot of things. I don't remember
as opposed
exactly
to real
what it was.
crutches.
Huh? Well, yeah, there was a problem with the crutch analogy, which the caller immediately slapped me in the face with. So I'd actually rather not go back to the crutch analogy. If you don't mind.
That does have limits.
It's a bad analogy. It's limited in a way that makes it immediately break down. But my ultimate point is, it is better to believe things that there's a good reason to think are actually true than it is to believe things that there is no good reason to believe are actually true. I know for a fact, being an atheist, that you can live a happy, productive, good life without believing in any gods. It does not take God belief to provide all those things, but it seems that religion is a set of beliefs that are not backed up by a good reason to believe they're true, other than the assumption that you got to believe them in order to have a happy, productive life.
Okay,
and that's not true, so the whole thing falls to pieces.
I had a response to that.
Okay, go ahead.
My response is, and it may be a small group of people, but there are people of, like you said, a very shallow mind that believe in things that simply aren't true or fall back on these crutches, and it may do them no good at all. They might be better off in some sense being an atheist. I don't know, but there are people of a mind, if they transcended their belief in God and it became a living experience, and what I'm saying is, okay, Christ said, love is giving one's life for one's friend. That's a quote in the Bible or something, but it said, the thing that I was going to say is, regardless, this group of people that chose to, let's say, walk in Christ's footsteps, however they chose to do that, they made a very conscious effort to follow a spiritual authoritarian past any supernatural belief, and it's much like you are under the authority of your own mind, or even national government. In the sense of what I'm saying, if this person followed after, let's say Christ, or let's say even Buddha, or any spiritual authority in mind, and they had this living experience in which they gave up, their selves for this one person, okay? Yeah. Let's say at their deathbed that they looked back at their life and realized this, realized how much they gave to someone, or how much, the fruits of their efforts had paid off. Even if it was not some big mystical belief and wonderment, if they lived that out, I mean, even under the authority of their own mind, it's not any better or worse than the authority that you live under right now.
Yes, it is, and here's why. Okay, because given the choice between believing things that there's good reason to think are true, and believing things that there isn't a good reason to think are true, it's better to believe the things that there's a good reason to think are true, right? Doesn't matter what the results are. I know there's good Christians doing good things. Of course there are. But there are atheists doing the same thing, right? Christians are not better people than atheists. Being a Christian does not make you a better person than being an atheist. So then, stripping all that off, we're left with the bare question: is there sufficient evidence to justify believing in these supernatural things? Or isn't there?
I didn't say it was supernatural. I said they walked.
Gods are inherently supernatural.
They walked in the footsteps of an authoritarian.
Okay, fine.
Very consciously,
right,
they made a very conscious effort to walk in under that person's authority.
I'll drop the word supernatural. Not important to my argument.
All right,
okay?
then
doesn't matter whether it's supernatural or not. It's better to believe. What? Pardon me?
I said, then I can probably hang up now, but go on. Let's finish what you're saying.
It doesn't matter whether they're supernatural things or non-supernatural things.
It might to some people, but yeah.
The time to believe a thing is after the evidence shows that it's probably true, and not before. And religious faith is about believing things that have not been shown to probably be true.
So
okay? Thanks for the call.
That's the difference. And
you've done.
Yeah. Okay. And the problem, And of course, another problem when you attach yourself with this devout belief system to a thing that isn't true, and in fact, at some point, sometime, something comes along to demonstrate to you that it isn't true, then the disillusionment becomes, I think, doubly hard to bear. people who have devoted themselves to believing falsehoods, and then they're finally confronted with it in a way confronted with evidence in a way that they just, apart from complete delusion, cannot deny. It's like, boy, I've been wrong. You're talking about now a person who's going to experience a great deal of emotional strife. They're going to be they could even, be psychologically damaged as a result.
Yeah, a lot of these questions come up on our FAQ, on our webpage.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, it just went down,
can we see the FAQ on the screen? I'm not sure how easy that is to read.
Well, you can just go to the atheist-community.org and click on the button that says FAQ.
Right.
You can do that.
And a lot of these things are standard questions that we get asked all the time, right?
Yeah.
Why should we care if somebody believes some set of things that they can't prove are true, but it makes them happy? Well, because all kinds of things can make you happy. Given a choice between two things that make you happy, believe the one that evidence suggests is probably true, and not the one that evidence suggests is probably false. Right, and it's really very clear.
But of course, he was now bringing up the whole personal experience thing.
I don't know anything about that.
Personal experiences can happen in all sorts of religions, all sorts of faiths, all sorts of weird cults. You'll get their members with their testimonials about how, I had this experience and changed my life.
Yeah, it's not just Christianity. Every religion's like that.
That's immaterial to the question of fact.
We got 4 minutes left. Should we take one more call?
We'll try Anthony, shall we?
Didn't we just have him?
No, that was Andrew. And then Kim and Lou, we apologize. We'll have to catch you next Sunday.
Yeah, Anthony, hi.
Hey, what's up, fella?
And Kim and Lou, who are online, we're probably not going to get to you. You can stay on just in case, but chances are we won't be able to talk. But we'll be here next week. Anthony, hi. What can we do for you?
How's it going, guys?
Good.
I got 2 questions for you, actually. The first is a very general question. I just wanted to get your feelings on agnosticism versus atheism. Why do you choose to believe specifically that God does not exist rather than simply abstaining from?
This is probably on our fact that we just mentioned, but in a nutshell, I'm actually an atheist with regard to some God claims, an agnostic with regard to other God claims, and a theist with regard to some God claims. The example I like to use is if I go to some South Seas island and the tribesmen on the island point to a totem pole and they say that's their God, I believe that totem pole exists. I don't have any reason not to believe that it exists. I won't necessarily agree with them about what the supernatural powers of the totem pole are, but as far as their God's existence is concerned, I'm a theist.
What about the Judeo-Christian sense?
On the atheism versus agnosticism thing, the way I break it down, which I got from a book called Atheism, the Case Against God by George Smith. Thank you. He drew a distinction between those two terms, saying that atheism is lack of theism, which is a statement about belief. Theism being belief in gods. And agnosticism means not Gnosticism, not knowledge, which it's a question of agnosticism addresses whether you claim to know for sure one way or the other or not, and theism and atheism only talks about whether you believe or not. There are agnostic theists. I've met them. People who believe in a God, but admit that they can't know for sure. They just believe. So it really depends on the specific God definition we're talking about, which of those terms I'm going to apply. With respect to all gods who are all-powerful but don't want me to know for sure that they exist, I'm an agnostic. An all-powerful God would absolutely for sure be able to make it so I couldn't know whether he existed or not, right? But with respect to gods like an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God in a universe where we have things that we agree are evil, I don't believe in that God because there's a specific problem called the problem of evil. A God who is all-knowing would not be unaware that there's evil. A God who's all-powerful wouldn't be unable to stop the evil, and a God who's all-loving wouldn't permit the evil. That God doesn't exist. It can be logically discarded. And I'm going to have to let you go. Thank you very much for your call. We're down to the last 45 seconds of the show. We'll be here next week again. Who was that? Anthony on the one. Thank you for your call, Anthony.
Thank you to our guests.
Thank you very much, Jim, for being on the show.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Hope you had a good time. Next week, I'm not going to be here. I'm out of town. Martin will be in the host chair. And our guest, once again, will be David Clark, talking about the Ten Commandments monolith on the lawn of the state capitol and his